a official Christian celebration, December the 25th was celebrated by indigenous people throughout the world as the time frame of the birth of the sun. And if you've ever read John Jackson's Introduction to African Civilization, there's a section in the book where he talks about the symbolic astronomical significance of the winter solstice. And that December the 25th is the first day after the winter solstice, when the length of the solstice means the sun is still. So during the 4 days of the solstice, from December the 21st through December the 24th, the length of the day does not increase nor decrease significantly. The sun is still as the earth tilts on its axis and begins to move in another direction. And so December the 25th is the first day when one can observe a significant increase in the amount of sunlight. It means to those African scientists that the sun, or God, was born on December the 25th, which means that you were guaranteed another year of life. So we got to see and understand the symbolism that was codified in this text in order to keep the masses of people away from the true source of power. It was said that 18 books were excluded from this new Christian Bible. These books can be found in a host of books, lost books of the Bible, the Apocrypha, and other texts. It's important to realize that at this Council of Nicaea, they deleted references to astronomy, to astrology, numerology, symbolism, and metaphysics. Now, when I talk about astronomy, I'm not talking about the stuff that you read in newspapers about Leos and Scorpios. I'm not talking about that nonsense. I'm talking about the profound science that is related to the movement of celestial bodies around planet Earth and how they affect everything on planet Earth is affected by celestial bodies. The moon goes through its phases every 29 days. As the moon goes through its phases and reaches the full moon, you notice that during the time of the full moon, you have the highest tides during the time of the full moon. You have 2 high tides every day. What does that mean? It means that the electromagnetic energy, the gravitational energy from the moon is pulling all of the water on planet Earth towards it. That is what creates a high tide. Right? And so this water is being pulled toward the moon. And as the moon moves around the Earth, this bulge of water rotates around the Earth like the moon does. It literally moves around the Earth. So people who study astronomy study the effects that celestial bodies, the sun, the moon, the planets, and other stars have on all life on planet Earth. If the moon can pull the water in the oceans, in the streams, in the lakes, the moon is also pulling the air as well. The Earth is 70% water. And if the moon can pull the ocean, then what do you think the moon can do to the water that is within your body? You are 70% water. That is the reason why in the late 1800s, psychologists at an insane asylum in England coined the phrase lunacy to describe those people in the insane asylum who only seem to go crazy 3 or 4 days out of the month. And those days, those periods of insanity coincided with the full moon. Hence they were called lunatics. Luna from the Latin word luna meaning moon. They were affected by this electromagnetic gravitational effect of this one celestial body. There are hundreds of celestial bodies in the sky, sisters and brothers. And they affect us in more ways than we can imagine. So the science of astrology, astrologos, star knowledge, is the science of the understanding of these effects on everything on planet Earth. Not just the water, but the atmosphere, the plants. Every living thing is affected by these forces. It's important to realize that, well, let me just skip and move to the next point because I'm going to make some key points before time runs out. This whole concept of monotheism was said to have been formally introduced in Kemet by Kemet, who lived from 1353 to 1333 BCE. And according to a number of texts, it was believed that his chief priest was the personality that we call today Moses. the time Moses, this historical person that's named Moses, services in Egypt, there were already 4 kings of Kemet with the suffix Moses in their name. There was Jehudimes, or Tutmosis the first, Tutmosis the second, Tutmosis the third, Tutmosis the fourth. There was Ahmose the first, Ahmose the second. It's from the word, Kemetic word Ahmose, that Hebrews derive the word Amos. Most of the names, according to Gary Greenberg in his book, The Moses Mystery, all of the names of the Hebrew patriarchs were derived from the names of Kemetic personalities. They used Kemetic history as the framework for fabricating this new text. It says in Acts 7, Acts chapter 7, verse 22, that Moses was learned in all of the wisdom of the Egyptians, and he was mighty in words and deeds, which meant that Moses went to school in Kemet, that he studied the priesthood in Kemet. And so the story gets a little quirky when Moses leaves, and he gives those who leave Kemet with them 10 commandments. But what we aren't taught is that he left 32 behind. In Kemet, they had 42 declarations of innocence. And if you compare the 42 declarations of innocence, the 42 admonitions of Ma'at, with the 10 commandments, you can see where these 10 commandments were derived. And what's significant is that in James Henry Breasted in Chicago at the Oriental Institute made this statement, I think back in the 40s, and he got in trouble when he said it, but it's true. James Henry Breasted did an account of personality known as Moses and the 10 Commandments, and showed how the 10 Commandments were derived from the 42 admonitions of Ma'at. And he said that you will notice that there is no commandment stating, "Thou shalt not lie." And as I like to remind people, if the people who taught us religion and taught us Christianity believed in just one of the 10 Commandments, "Thou shalt not steal," we'd be having this conversation in Africa right now. Brother Smalls, at a lecture in Baltimore a couple of months ago, raised a point that I think was very significant. I want to share that with you now. That the significance of the Passover, we buy into these activities without really understanding their origin. The whole essence of the Passover is rooted in the last of the 10 plagues of Moses, where Moses said that that the firstborn son of every Egyptian was going to die, and that the Jews were protected by putting blood on their doorstep. The spirit of death would bypass their homes so that the firstborn children in their household would not die. So every time you celebrate Passover, what you're celebrating is the death and the murder of tens of thousands of African children. No one has ever put it to you in this context. It's not very often that people talk about the murder, the death, the brutality that was issued out or meted out at the hands of Moses. I'll give you another example. In Numbers 31, an Israeli war party comes back to Moses after having defeated an enemy, and they report to Moses that they killed all of the adult males. And Moses flew into a rage, and he sent them back to, and I quote now, to kill every woman who has slept with a man, to kill all of the boys, and save the virgins for yourselves. Now, what's honorable about that? There's nothing honorable about this behavior, about this language, but we've got to begin to read it with a different set of eyes in order to understand who this book is really about, or what aspects of this book we can use for ourselves. What's significant about the 42 admonitions of Ma'at is a scene that is one of my favorites, the scene of the weighing of the soul, where the heart of the deceased person stands before the scale of Ma'at, the scale of truth and justice and righteousness, and his soul, his heart is weighed on the scale of Ma'at. And it is at this scene where the soul of the deceased recites the 42 admonitions of Ma'at, declares their innocence. I have not stolen, I have not robbed, I have not defrauded offerings, I have not polluted myself, I have not polluted the land, I have not committed And so it is a way that our ancestors understood that we had to be pure of heart in order to move through life. The 42 admonitions of Ma'at were not just so that your heart could be weighed favorably on the scale of justice at the time of your death, but it was designed specifically for you to live a meaningful life while you were here on planet Earth and cultivate meaningful relationships with the people that you were interacting with every day of your lives. So it was not just for death, it was for right now. Children were raised. They didn't have Sesame Street and all of this other nonsense. They were raised with Ma'at to understand the principles and concepts of Ma'at. So there was a different consciousness that emanated from these African people. It's important to realize, as Gerald Massey references in his Ancient Egypt, the Light of the World, parallels and similarities between Heru and Jesus. Because you will find all of these personalities existed first in ancient Kemet. The earthly Jesus is equivalent to Heru. Jesus the Christ corresponds to Asar, the resurrected God. So he is a combination of the stories between Asar and Heru. Some of the early names for Heru in Kemet were the Prince of Peace. He was called the Good Shepherd. He was called the Lamb. He was called the Light of the World. He was called the Lord of Resurrection. He was called the Raiser of the Dead. He was called the Son of God. 4,000 years before Jesus. You can find symbols of Heru and his mother Aset throughout Europe. They're called shrines of the Black Madonna and Child. You'll find them in Spain. You'll find them in Russia. You'll find them in Paris. You'll find them in Poland. Pope John Paul II is from Czeskokowa. That is where they have a major shrine of the Black Madonna. Every time he goes home to pray at the shrine of the Black Madonna. Many of these images of this black mother and child are kept in the basements or kept out of public view. Black faces. What's interesting on the ones that are for public display, they would tell you these protracted stories of how these statues became black. There was a fire in the church in the 17th century, and the fire blackened just the face and the hands of the statue. It's really interesting the extent to which people will go through to try to camouflage the truth. What's also significant is that African spiritual traditions were copied by the Hebrews, and then the Greeks, then the Italians, the Irish, the French, the Germans, everyone else. And then anytime you make a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy, you lose sight of the original. And what you think is the real thing can't compare with the original. According to the World Christian Encyclopedia, as of 2001, there were over 33,800 different Christian denominations. And as of 1996, there were over 130 versions of the Bible. Now you've got this one story with all of these variations of this thing. Now, all of them can't be right. But do we question it? Do we ask who's right? What is the original source material? How was it changed? When was it changed? And what were the changes and how did they affect us? A version is defined as a change in form, a transformation, a conversion, a translation, or rendering. And according to Reverend Peter Goins, who is the Dean of Harvard School of Divinity and the author of a book entitled With Hand and Heart, he said that there are 66 books in the Bible, which were written by 66 different people over a period of 2,000 years. How do you reconcile that? 66 different people writing 66 different interpretations of something over a period of 2,000 years. So this book is not one book that was written by one person at a setting. You have to begin to understand where it came from. African spirituality taught that the powers of the Creator could be manifested within humans on earth. These new religious ideologies taught that man was conceived in sin and that the Son of God had to give his life for your salvation. They literally